The top story on ABC News Breakfast, the government's numbers are back on a knife edge. Peter Slipper has stepped aside as Speaker of the House of Representatives. He's accused of misusing cab charges and could face a criminal investigation.
A former staff member has also accused Mr Slipper of sexually harassing him. Mr Slipper has denied both allegations. The opposition leader Tony Abbott says it's an issue of integrity.
It's not a question of whether the government might lose its majority. It's a question of whether this government has lost its integrity. That's the issue, not whether the government will keep its majority, but whether the government can keep its integrity. And the only way this government can redeem any shred of honour is if the Prime Minister now urgently resolve the second integrity issue hovering over this government, the Craig Thomson issue.
Tony Abbott there. We're joined now by our political correspondent Melissa Clark from Canberra. Mel, good morning to you. OK, bring us up to speed with both the civil and the criminal allegations hovering over Peter Slipper.
Well, on one hand, we have the criminal matters, and that is the alleged misuse of cab charges. Now, at the moment, the AFP, the Australian Federal Police and the Finance Department are looking at those elements, so they're still seeing whether there needs to be investigation. So we're not at the stage where there's a formal criminal investigation, but those allegations are being looked at. And then, of course, on the other hand, there's the civil matter, papers having been filed in court when it comes to allegations. The Speaker sexually harassed one of his staff members late last year. So Peter Slipper has stepped down because of those issues surrounding the cab charges rather than the sexual harassment issue, pointing to the severity of those criminal matters and the need to step aside. But both Peter Slipper and the federal government are hoping that those thoughts of investigations will be dismissed or at least clarified by the time the next time Parliament rolls around, which is actually only 2 weeks away, the 9th of May, of course, being Budget Day.
And Mr Slipper has stepped aside. He now can't vote in Parliament while those allegations are being investigated. And in doing so, that has brought the government's majority back down to a wafer-thin status.
Yeah, so what happens is with Peter Slipper stepping aside from the Speaker's chair, his vote doesn't count, he can't vote while he's stepped aside. So the Deputy Speaker is now the one who will preside over the chamber, and that, of course, is Labor's Anna Burke. So the Labor Party loses a vote there. So they go from having, as a minority government, down to 75 votes to the coalition that can count on 73. So what the real question, though, is if a no-confidence motion were moved, and the coalition certainly seemed keen to go down that path, whether or not the government can retain the support of the crossbenchers. If Andrew Wilkie were to shift his support to the coalition, he's made it pretty clear he's not happy with the government and they can't rely on his support, but he also doesn't get on that well with the coalition these days either. But if we were to take the worst-case scenario from the Labor Party's point of view, Andrew Wilkie moves across. That leaves both sides tied at 74 apiece, and the Speaker can cast the deciding vote. So the Labor Party would still manage to hang on in that situation. But it certainly means the government is relying on every single backbencher being in Parliament and casting their vote and not annoying more than one crossbencher because it can't afford to.
That is so much the case. And finally, Mel, the Prime Minister has jetted out for an overseas visit. She's going to Singapore and will be in Turkey for Anzac Day. But of course, domestic political considerations, the very future of her government, will dog this trip for her.
Once again, the Labor Party's efforts to try and get a bit of momentum going have fallen flat because of circumstances intervening. The government had announced its aged care reforms, which was widely well received. The Prime Minister heading off to Singapore and Turkey, of course, for Anzac Day, which will no doubt look very statesmanlike and show her in her role as Prime Minister. And then coming back to what is meant to be the centrepiece for the Labor Party this year, Budget Day and a return to surplus. Well, of course, that's now all going to be overshadowed, and it seems to be the rhythm of this government these days that just as it tries to make and manages to make a little bit of headway, another crisis comes along, and this certainly is one because there'll be a lot of extra pressure on every backbencher, particularly Craig Thomson. Now his vote is absolutely crucial, and of course the budget gets that little bit harder because now all of the crossbenchers in the lower house are in much stronger bargaining positions. So to be a crossbencher at the moment is a good thing. It's a very powerful thing.
You'd reckon. Melissa Clark in Canberra, thank you.